Was there a connection between the Nazi war machine and something out of this world?
The word disc-shaped craft developed in the Third Reich. You know, the Nazis were also developing the nuclear bomb.
There's this German compass from the 1940s, and it could have coded clues to a UFO connection.
This is a navigational compass for one of those ships.
What seems probable is that the Germans were racing to develop a kind of wonder weapon.
The Nazis wanted to build the so-called Wunderwaffe to change the war.
We found out they launched a rocket into space. Maybe just a range test, or maybe an attempt at communication.
We've uncovered a never-before-seen secret location that can possibly explain the mystery between the Nazis and UFOs.
It was something unconventional, some kind of a spacecraft.
This is case number 19104, Nazi UFOs.
Well, the two greatest stories of the 20th century are the evil of the Nazis and the appearance of UFOs. Each was earth-changing in its own way.
Well, it can't just be a coincidence that right after this highly technological Nazi regime fell, the United States experienced one of its largest UFO waves, right? I mean, there could be some kind of link.
I know they had very advanced technology, probably 25 years ahead of the rest of the world, but this is all conventional technology. It's not UFO technology.
The fact is, all the scientists that did that went straight to New Mexico, where we were launching the rockets, and then they became the basis of NASA. And one of the key scientists, the big one, Herman Oberth, said, we were helped by people from other worlds. Who's the we? I say it's the Nazis. We're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we're about to meet with U.S. Air Force veteran Bill Line, who's in possession of a mysterious German compass, an advanced piece of technology that might be the connection between the Nazis and UFOs. The serial number on this compass was traced all the way back to Nazi Germany, where it was fabricated in 1943.
This compass is technically called a Peiltochterkompass. This thing will only work in 30-degree increments, so it's not on a regular airplane. This works off of a master compass, a gyro. If you point this towards the North Star, then no matter where you fly on the Earth, the master compass will continue to keep its heading.
Bill's compass is dependent on a master compass. The system works like this. The master compass zeroes in on the North Star. Each time the craft changes headings, it activates a motor in the master compass, which in turn sends an electric signal to the Peiltochter compass. That signal changes the headings on the Peiltochter compass to show the pilot or navigator the precise location of the craft. It sounds complicated, but it's necessary when a craft can't rely on Earth's magnetic field for guidance.
Bill, where'd you find this thing?
I found this at a salvage yard here in Albuquerque. It was classified salvage.
After World War II, the military labs and proving grounds here in New Mexico generated both unclassified salvage, scrap metal which could be sold back to the public, and classified salvage, which had to be destroyed by the military itself. Bill Line says the compass somehow escaped destruction and mysteriously wound up in a scrapyard thanks to an employee.
He was under security clearance. His job was to bring salvage to the salvage companies. But he was taking stuff and on the side doing a little double set of books.
There are two compelling aspects to the story for me. First, we have a classified piece of salvage that should have never wound up in a scrapyard in the first place. And second, it winds up in the hands of an Air Force veteran who says he knows what it was used for.
I actually recognized it because when I was a boy, I saw UFOs coming from New Mexico across the West Texas border, and they were turning in 30-degree increments. The ship I saw in 1953, this was like two walks stuck together, and it was about 50 feet in diameter, very bright, shiny metal. And on the top, there was this electrical discharge that was producing fantastic colors. There was a trail of ions behind it that sparkled and glittered and gradually faded out as this thing took off. And then it shot to a point of infinity in 3 seconds.
Do you think what you saw was extraterrestrial in origin, or do you think it was man-made?
I automatically said it's just an aircraft. It's a machine. I've never seen a machine made by anyone but human beings. And this is where all the research was taking place after World War II. This is where they brought all the German scientists. Any ship that could go that fast, you would have to have something to know where the heck you were. And when I saw the face of this device, I could see that it was divided up into 30-degree increments. I said, wow, you know, this is a navigational compass for one of those ships.
Suddenly, a device turns up. It turns up in a salvage yard, a mysterious compass that doesn't work like a magnetic compass. Where was it built? Built in Germany. And there's some kind of a connection. It tells me we have to go to Germany, go to the source, and find out where this originated and why. If you've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, then you're familiar with Nazi Germans running all over the world looking for artifacts and relics from which they could summon a spiritual power. And we have the records. There's no doubt that they did that. And there was one organization that began at the beginning of the 20th century that the Germans were fascinated with. It was the Vril Society, a kind of a mystical organization that claimed that it could channel the beginnings of the Aryan race, not from someplace here on Earth, but from extraterrestrial.
The German Vril Society is a society interested in what the Vril is. Vril is a notion of a superpower going beyond atomic power, something that has the ability to do all kinds of fantastic things, including those attributed to UFOs. At the end of World War I, where Germany was in abject defeat, it was of interest to German militarists as a possible source of power. The mediums in the Vril Society were saying that this force could be used to power craft.
There were mediums that were doing exactly what?
Okay, generally speaking, mediumship is thought of in terms of communication with the dead. There's another group of mediums who channel material that is related to extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial beings, and it claims that it comes from the science of these beings, and that if we adapt that science, we will learn a great deal about higher technology than we have. Of course, the Nazis, being interested in power, quickly bought into that, and the more desperate the war became, the more they wanted to do aircraft in tune with these mediums who were transmitting this material. They seemed to grasp the shape of these things, which was saucer-shaped or cigar-shaped, just as UFOs that are seen today, but they could never get the idea of the power that was involved in these things, because apparently, even though they used the name Vril Society, they never understood what the Vril actually is.
The Vril is a kind of a life force, the Force, even from Star Wars, the force that makes things work.
Could what the Vril Society gained be the reason for this 25-year leap that the Germans had in technology over everybody else?
Could it be? I think that it almost certainly is a major part of that.
Alan Greenfield is telling us some pretty strange stuff. Germans channeling extraterrestrial knowledge from the planet Aldebaran. But what's interesting about that is that it does match up with what Hermann Oberth said. We were helped by people from other worlds. And we also know that the Nazis were absolutely obsessed with advancing their science by any means possible. How did the whole story of Nazi UFOs begin?
Well, first of all, there were disc-shaped craft developed in the Third Reich. And you know, the Nazis were also developing the nuclear bomb.
Michael Hessman is a very important German historian who spent a lot of time researching and developing information on the Third Reich. But more important for us, he's personally interviewed German scientists, especially Hermann Oberth.
I interviewed the German Nazi engineer who developed the German Nazi flying disc. His idea was that flying saucers could deliver the nuclear bombs to the Allied capitals. So Hermann Göring started a small project to develop this disc-shaped helicopter, and it went into the test flight, but it didn't really maneuver sufficiently.
It was simply a helicopter with internal rotors.
Conventional technology. I mean, if Nazi Germany would have had flying saucer fireman's technology, do you really believe it would have lost the war? Of course not. Hitler would have used everything to win the war, to get the final victory.
There were two reasons the Germans lost the war. One, they simply couldn't develop this technology fast enough to get it weaponized, to use it to win the war. But the second is really intriguing. We know that there were German scientists who refused to let the German High Command have this technology in the first place. They denied this technology to the German military leadership precisely because they didn't want them to win the war.
Hermann Oberth gave a quote that we were helped by people from other worlds.
True.
What did he mean?
After World War II, he joined the UFO movement in Germany. He became the honorary president of the German UFO study group. And the German UFO study group involved contactees and psychics. He himself worked with a channel medium and received channeled information.
So he was successful.
Yeah, very much.
He did get information.
He believed in it. He believed that he came in contact with extraterrestrials through this channeling medium.
What a shock. Michael Hessman told us that Hermann Oberth, the father of Nazi rocketry, was a trance medium. Could that be one of the reasons the Germans were 25 years ahead of the rest of the world when it came to technology? And Oberth brought that ability to NASA in the 1960s. That's a huge revelation. Maybe there's a clue at Peenemünde itself, and that's where we have to go.
In trying to figure out how a Nazi-era compass, possibly a piece of a UFO, might have gotten into a scrapyard in New Mexico, we've come all the way back to Germany, looking for clues. We've heard a lot of different theories about how the Germans might have taken a giant leap forward in science and technology, and now we're heading toward the very place where Hermann Oberth and his protege Werner von Braun worked and helped develop this technology, the Peenemünde Army Research Center, right here on the Baltic Sea.
What was the significance of Peenemünde to the entire war effort?
Peenemünde was the first huge research center of the world. You can compare it to Silicon Valley, for example.
Christian Mühldorfer-Vogt is the director of the Historical Technical Information Center at Peenemünde and has studied every aspect of what the Nazi scientists did here.
This research center was needed as to build the first rocket that reached the space. This was the innovation because nobody before was able to produce a thrust of 24 tons. The Russians and the Americans at that time were able to produce only 1.5 ton.
Rocket engines excite a gas or fluid which is expelled in one direction, and the thrust force is applied to the engine in the opposite direction. According to Christian, during World War II, while all superpowers were working on rocket technology, the Germans somehow found a breakthrough that gave them rocket power 16 times greater than their adversaries. That's in addition to technology that the Germans developed, like computers, closed-circuit televisions, jet engines, and they were far ahead of their adversaries, that's for sure.
What other innovative technologies came from this place?
There were the first computers here. The technical TV was also in action.
Why were the Germans so much more advanced than the Americans or the Russians or anybody else?
That's because this research center was aiming to control the world with military means.
You're saying when you have a dictatorship that can focus the efforts of a group, that group tends to advance faster.
Now, if this place was so secret, how did the Allies find out about it?
In June 1942, English airplanes, they took photos here from Peenemünde. And in 1943, the first attack by more than 600 airplanes from the Royal Air Force, and 70% here was destroyed.
Did the bombing stop the work here?
The mass production of V1 and V2, this was put into Mittelbau-Dora, the concentration camp in a hill in the Harz Mountains.
After Peenemünde was bombed, the Germans had to move underground, which allowed for increased secrecy and possibly the development of unconventional technology. The man in charge of these underground facilities was Hans Kammler, an SS general who found engineering solutions to the darkest Nazi projects.
In 1943, World War II was lost for the German troops. They wanted to build the so-called Wunderwaffe, a wonder weapon, to change the war. But the Nazis hoped to change and to win.
As Germany was losing the war, a group of scientists here vested all their hope in one single weapon, which they called the Wunderwaffe. What was it? Was it a super jet? Was it a guided missile? Was it a flying saucer? Was it something else? Was it something that was so powerful, such an ultimate weapon, that one stroke and the fortunes of war would turn? This is what we now have to investigate.
See that sign? Oh, wow. Munition belastes Gebiet, Lebensgefahr, betreten verboten.
What does that mean?
It means unexploded munitions, life-threatening, no entry.
So this whole area probably contains British bombs. They bombed this place heavily, but it still might be live after all these years.
I have to admit, I find it pretty convincing. The culmination of the advanced technology was the V2 rocket. There's no mention of UFOs, no extraterrestrials, and it's as simple as that.
Just because the scientists we talked to didn't know anything about the Wunderwaffe doesn't mean that it didn't exist. I mean, things were chaotic at the end of the war, right?
I believe the Germans saw something. I believe they had contact with something, possibly an alien race, and it was that that seeded the technology that was here.
In October 1942, the Germans first launched the V2 rocket from Peenemünde, the first time anyone ever launched anything into space. This raises the question, was the V2 only a weapon, or was it a means to send a signal to extraterrestrials, much like the channelers of the Vril? I don't think the Wunderwaffe was conventional. I think the Wunderwaffe might well have been the mysterious German project called Die Glocke, the bell.
We've arranged to talk to Dr. Axel Stull, who's a geophysicist, an expert on unified field theory, and the author of a book about high technology in the Third Reich.
This high technology was developed during the Third Reich, flying saucers, special aircrafts, much more.
Have you heard of anything called Die Glocke?
The Glocke is a space-time curvation.
Space-time curvation.
In other words, much more easier, is a time tunnel.
This is a major piece of the puzzle. Once we can understand how this device might have been able to alter space-time, we'll have a much better explanation for exactly how UFOs might work.
The work is based on electromagnetic fields, 100 million volts voltage and more. Plasma too. They are so-called electrogravitation fields. This is the propulsion.
This is the propulsion.
So, yeah, from the flying saucers, yes.
Dr. Stoll has validated a theory that advanced spacecraft would employ electromagnetic propulsion. If what he says is true, then it kind of supports what Bill Lyon told us about UFOs in New Mexico traveling within electromagnetic fields.
The Glocke is very complicated. This engineer is situated, so-called Project Riese.
The Riese mine?
Yes, it's a correlation. You see, Project Riese was the greatest project during the Third Reich.
Project Riese was a vast underground complex extending for miles and miles in Lower Silesia, which is now part of Poland.
Was this the Wunderwaffe?
Yes, was produced in the Project Riese flying saucers and atomic weapons.
Bill Lyon's compass
This is a navigational compass for one of those ships.
has led us to the very heart of where German rocketry began.
So the first rocket that was launched into space was from here.
Yes, from here, from Peenemünde.
And it wasn't just rocketry, there's all kinds of advanced technology. And now we're looking to go and investigate the underground resources, what really happened. And we're on the trail of one thing that's driving this. Where is and what is the Wunderwaffe?
We're heading into the Owl Mountains of Poland, home to the mysterious Project Riese. Translated into English, Project Riese means giant project, and it's one of the biggest mysteries of the Third Reich. Now, according to Dr. Stoll, the Bell was built in this vicinity, so we're going to explore an abandoned underground factory near Jeschke for answers.
How are you?
I'm going to show you some of the secrets of the Third Reich, what the Germans were doing here.
Igor Wachowski is a military and aviation historian, and he was the first to uncover evidence that the Bell may have been built and tested in this area.
So how far into the earth does this go?
This one goes some 200, 300 meters.
So how many of these underground factories are there in Riese?
There are 6 such facilities within Riese.
Is this
Here.
one of the largest ones?
No, it's one of the smallest. It's an underground factory. They would be connected and would form one larger spider web of tunnels.
This is all cement block.
So this is a small confining room and there's a machine gun. What is this place?
It's a guard station in protecting one of the entrances to the Riese complex.
The fact that there was a machine gun bunker here suggests that something very secret was going on in the Riese.
But that's not why I brought you here. There is a contradiction between the size of the facility that we can see today and what the German data from the time of the Second World War say. There should be something much bigger here.
You think there's actually more to this place, more than what people know about?
Yes, and I'm just going to show you that.
Wow.
We're in the Owl Mountains of Lower Silesia, where Polish scholar Igor Wachowski is showing us a major project called Project Riese, where possibly Die Glocke was assembled.
So it's sucking right up.
Yes, it's going up around 6 or 7 meters, and there is no outlet of the air on the surface of the mountain. So there must have been some cavity out there, and a large one.
We know that hot air rises because it's less dense than cold air. So when Igor lit the tissue, it created an updraft that sucks the tissue through the pipe. And what this tells us is that there's a huge cavity of cold air up there, which creates a pressure differential and quickly draws the tissue through the pipe.
Is it possible to get up to the other levels?
All the entrances have been blown up, and there is literally no access to it.
This is crucial. We now know that the size of this cavern inside this mountain was large enough to hold a weapon that was possibly key to the development of the Wunderwaffe.
So what is above us?
What we cannot see is the central part of the Riese, where supposedly the production of the Wunderwaffe was taking place already before the end of the war.
Igor, do you have any idea or any evidence of what kind of craft they were building here?
Yes, I do, but I have to take you to another place to show you.
Wow, is that it?
Yeah.
Amazing. Look at how big that is, Kevin.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
This really is unbelievable.
The henge has a diameter of over 100 feet, and it's a very strong structure. It doesn't resemble anything like a water tower or cooling tower, support structure for that, for example, because it's plastered and it's painted with the green camouflage paint. One of the other strange facts is that it has an unusually strong reinforcement, which says that there were very strong forces acting on it.
So you think some sort of important craft was tested here using the henge as a test rig of some sort?
It could have been used for testing the bell, the Glocke.
If the bell is powerful enough to create a space-time distortion, then it could leave traces that would still be evident decades later. So what we're going to do is look for radiation signatures and magnetic aberrations in the center of the henge.
This looks like a good spot.
I got something hard. It's a brick.
And we didn't find any evidence at the center of the henge, so now we have to look at the perimeter.
If the Glocke really did exist, then if it would have created a large level of radiation, it would have spread from the center all the way to these columns here. And possibly we'd pick something up. But it's been so many years, I'm not surprised that we're not getting any unusual readings at all.
The bell utilized some kind of torsion field physics related with gravity, but quantum physics as well.
If they're relating gravity to quantum physics, you're talking about time travel.
Yes, it was one of the aspects of this device.
Igor Witkowski is explaining to us the theories of time travel. Time travel. That's something I've always linked to the existence of UFOs. He's showing us this facility and explaining how the bell could actually disrupt local space-time.
It worked in such a way that inside there were two metal cylinders or drums. There was a mercury inside these drums, which rotated or spun around the common axis to a very high speeds by the flow of the electric discharge, electric current.
How important do you think this was to the German High Command?
I have managed to find a document in one of the archives in the United States, actually. in which it is stated that it was the most important research project of the Third Reich.
All right, guys, follow me.
And we're in Poland looking for a connection between UFOs and Nazis, and we found this strange structure that could possibly be used as a UFO test rig. But I think there's a more plausible explanation, and I've found some evidence to back me up.
Well, you're taking us to a dump?
All right,
This is great.
this is a good vantage point. Look behind me, right here. Behold, it's the henge. It's right there. It's simply a concrete support for a water tower and a power plant.
Well, of course they're similar, Kevin. I mean, we're not saying that aliens built the henge. We're not saying that that's some kind of extraterrestrial structure. I mean, both of these were built by humans, so of course they look similar, right?
Yeah, and the fact is, it's camouflage. It's supposed to be camouflaged. You don't have a top secret weapon to end the war and put a neon sign on it saying top secret weapon to end the war.
So if you're going to have a test rig, you disguise it as a water tower. That's what you're saying?
Absolutely. You disguise it. You hide it in plain sight.
I mean, do you remember at the henge, there was a factory close by, a power plant. They needed a water tower for the cooling system, and that's exactly what the henge was. It was a base for that, just like we're seeing here. Look, guys, it's Occam's razor. Then the theory states that the simplest answer is always the best. And it's clear we have the same thing going on right here. The simple answer is, at the henge, there was a factory. It needed a cooling system, a water tower, and the henge is simply the base of a water tower.
We're back in Lower Silesia, the home of Project Riese. We're in the old German town of Bad Salzbrunn, where Igor Wodkowski is showing us a sanatorium, and what we find here may well connect the secrets of the bell to the other parts of the Project Riese complex.
This is the vacuum chamber, a pressurized chamber that was used by the Germans during the war. A German scientist, Professor Hubertus Struckhold, who was commanding this place. He was a pioneer of space medicine research.
So why was there a space medicine research here at that time, 1940s?
We know that he was experimenting here with some kind of simulator of a spacecraft. We know from the testimonies of prisoners of the concentration camp here that Struckhold was carrying experiments on humans. They simulated altitudes up to 40,000 meters to ascertain what altitude can the human body withstand.
40,000 meters equals 130,000 feet. And if what Igor is saying is true, then these altitudes would cause permanent damage, if not immediate death. UFO connection or not, if they were using human subjects in these kinds of experiments, then this is another example of Nazi brutality.
Well, this is obviously a pressure chamber, but this whole building used to be a sanatorium. And back in the 40s, there were a lot of bronchial diseases. Couldn't this just be a room to just merely treat these bronchial diseases?
It could have been such a room, but Professor Struckhold in an interview has said that he carried out his experiments related to space research in this part of this small city. So this is the only place that matches the description.
Let me get this straight. Are we saying that this room was part of some kind of training program or testing program to send people on some kind of craft into space?
Professor Struckhold himself has said in an interview after the war that he tested here underground some kind of a spacecraft that was controlled by men sitting inside. It was something strange, something unconventional, and something that was contribute to the victory of the Third Reich.
You're talking the Wunderwaffe.
Yes, it would have been the Wunderwaffe, wonder weapon.
In looking for the origins of Bill Line's compass, we've checked out leads in Berlin, Peenemünde, and Lower Silesia. Here's what we know. The Nazis may have benefited from extraordinarily unconventional technology. And the bell, die Glocke, fits the description of the Wunderwaffe that the Nazis were developing.
Look, this is just like every other UFO case we've investigated. There's always a witness, we can't confirm the testimony, information that we can't find strict evidence for. There's always a door closed. There's always an underground facility that we can't gain access to.
Well, of course there is, because it's all top secret. All the names that we've investigated here, Debus, Oberth, von Braun, they all went to work for NASA in the United States.
Pat makes a good point. At the end of it, what did the Germans do? They gave the secrets up when the secrets came to the United States.
It's a matter of recorded fact that after the end of the war, hundreds of Nazi rocket scientists found their way into the United States. For us to track the trail of Nazi UFOs, we have to follow the lead of these Nazi scientists.
At the end of World War II, both the Americans and the Soviets clearly recognized the superiority of German technology, at least in certain areas. The Americans launched Operation Paperclip, and the Soviets later answered with Operation Solovyku. Both tried to grab as many German scientists as they could before the other superpower got to them.
We're in Huntsville, Alabama to find out more about Operation Paperclip and its legacy for the American space program and Nazi UFOs.
Hi, Bill. Nice to meet you.
Hi, thank you for meeting with us today.
Operation Paperclip originally started in September of 1946 to bring former Nazi rocket scientists and aeronautical engineers into the United States, and they were actually given political immunity in exchange for technical expertise.
Michael Schratt is an aviation historian who specializes in reporting how the military-industrial complex covers up black operations.
Now, we're investigating the possibility that some flying saucer technology came over from Germany into the United States. What evidence is there for that?
There is a paper trail to reference for this, and this is an actual Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Air Material Command document, and it basically shows you how this technology was brought from the Third Reich and trickled into the aerospace industry. It starts up here on the upper left-hand corner, German Air Force, then it goes into the Luftwaffe, German Research and Technical Institutions, German Aircraft Industry. That flows then to the Air Documents Division, or T2, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And then that gets filtered on to the U.S. Air Force, U.S. Navy, U.S. Army, American industry, and universities.
T2 was the Air Technical Intelligence Division of the United States military. Based in Wright Field, Ohio, it analyzed all the documents pertaining to Operation Paperclip. They also investigated UFO reports.
We have some really good evidence that, in fact, some of the British and Canadian designs were, in point of fact, procured from the German originals. They were working on what was called a VTOL supersonic gyroplane using a radial thrust engine, and that's Project Y.
Project Y was an attempt to create a vertical takeoff and landing space car. It was better known as the Avro car, films of which show how hard it was to corral a flying saucer.
We were investigating the Bell before. Did any of that transfer over here?
The Bell, which was approximately 15 feet high, 12 feet in diameter, it had two counter-rotating drums on the upper section of the Bell. There was a central shaft that went down the center of the craft that terminated in what's called the thermos bottle. And from the Germans' own documents, we know that a chemical called cerium-525 was actually pumped into this vehicle, and that represented the plasma vortex that was created by this craft.
Is this some kind of writing or inscription around the base?
Back in December 9th, 1965, we had an almost identical looking craft crash in the woods of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, and it too had the same or similar hieroglyphic writing.
Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, 1965. A strange-looking craft allegedly crashes, and it looks a lot like the Glocke. Thousands of people see it, and they even have a monument there now. Now, supposedly, it was carted off by the military. So the line of reasoning is Nazis create the Glocke. Their technology comes to the US along with the German scientists, and they create more of these craft.
Since these craft are identical, is there a human link between the Glocke in the 1940s and Kecksburg 1960s?
In fact, the gentleman who was the senior project design engineer for the Bell program was a man by the name of Kurt Davis. Davis was launch director at NASA between 1962 and 1974.
This is the bombshell we've been waiting for. Kurt Davis, an electrical engineer who actually was part of Project Riese and die Glocke, comes to America to work for NASA. He winds up the launch director of NASA in the 1960s, just when the event at Kecksburg takes place in December 1965. This is the proof that I need that some of the UFOs we see are man-made. Some of what we're seeing up there isn't them, it's us.
When you spend $400 billion per year on classified black budget programs, you are going to get something for your money.
And where would you keep those flying saucers?
You would keep them at Edwards North Base Complex. You would keep some of them at MacDill Air Force Base. You would keep some of them at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Remaining craft are at the remote test site in Nevada.
At Area 51.
At Area 51.
It's curious that many of the Nazi scientists that came over as a result of Project Paperclip all wound up in New Mexico, Texas, and Nevada, all of which are UFO hotspots.
Mike Schratt was really something.
If you see what Schratt showed us, if you look at the plans, the details, the designs, I mean, there's no disputing that the Germans really were 25 years ahead of everybody else.
Were the Germans actually contemplating putting manned craft in outer space?
Why not? I mean, they were the first to put the first rocket into space, right?
Right. And then Struckhold went on to work for NASA and developed the first spacesuit. Very convincing.
Hubertus Struckhold, the man behind the pressure chamber experiments in the sanatorium, went on to head up the NASA Space Medicine program and played a big role in developing the first pressurized spacesuit in 1958. So it seems to back up Igor's theory that the Nazis were carrying out experiments to put a man in space.
Guys, what really impressed me the most was visiting the underground factories and facilities in the Riese complex. If they were developing some kind of Wunderwaffe, that would have been the perfect place to do it. The more desperate they got, the more they embraced secret concepts and ideas. The result? Nazi experimental craft like the Bell.
Can you imagine the world? Had they been able to launch that thing and send it wherever they wanted to send it, and send it with an atomic bomb? Can you imagine the world today?
We've established the link between the Nazis and UFO technology. We've established the link between that UFO technology and the American space program and how far we've come since 1945. We know that von Braun, Oberth, Davis, Struckhold came to the United States in paperclip and revolutionized conventional aircraft technology. But what else did they revolutionize? Did they bring us the technology of UFOs?